Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're on what you might call an existential mission.
I'd say so.
We're cracking open the playbooks of three really powerful psychological approaches: logotherapy, CBT, and ACT.
Right.
And we're going to see how each one helps us tackle the biggest human questions: suffering, meaning, and, well, the final curtain, death.
That's it. When you look at the research, it's just so clear. The search for meaning isn't some kind of luxury.
No, it's a necessity.
It's a core human drive. And the thing is, suffering becomes bearable if you have that meaning in sight. So today we're exploring three really different systems. One tries to change our circumstances, another tries to change our thoughts.
And the third changes our whole attitude toward things we just can't change.
Exactly.
And for this, we're pulling from some deep research on meaning-based therapies, existential psychotherapy, and of course, modern behavioral science. We really want to know what tools these systems can offer you. So let's start with the one born from the most extreme suffering you can imagine: Viktor Frankl's logotherapy.
Frankl's core messages, it's just so powerful. He basically said, when you cannot change a situation, you have to change yourself.
The last freedom.
It's the last human freedom, the freedom to choose your attitude in any given set of circumstances.
And nothing brings that home more than the anecdote from his time in Auschwitz. Our sources remind us he was, in a way, doing this impromptu existential research right there.
He was.
He'd ask his fellow inmates this one crucial question: do you have a reason to see tomorrow?
Is there a waiting daughter, a book you still need to finish?
A promise you have to keep.
And the patterns he saw were just profound. The data, as informal as it was, suggested that the ones who held on to a reason, a purpose that was bigger than the horror of the moment, they often had the resilience to survive.
So logotherapy is really rooted in that belief that this freedom of attitude is always there.
Always, even under the most absolute brutal constraint.
It makes complete sense then why it's used so much in areas dealing with huge loss, existential crises, trauma, oncology, hospice care.
Yes, because it reframes suffering. It's not this meaningless void. It's a chance to exercise that inner freedom, to uphold your own dignity.
And he actually developed specific techniques, which, when you look at them, are surprisingly counterintuitive.
They really are.
Okay, let's get into those. First up is dereflection. How does that actually work?
So dereflection is all about shifting your focus. It's about moving away from this self-obsession.
Like with insomnia.
Insomnia is a perfect example.
Well,
Or performance anxiety. The more you try to sleep, the more you monitor yourself.
the more awake you are, you're just staring at the symptom.
Exactly. You're amplifying it with your attention, dereflection says. Stop staring at the symptom. It'll lose its power. Instead of trying so hard to sleep, get up and do something mentally challenging.
You redirect your attention outward.
You turn your attention away from the internal problem and towards something of value.
I love that. Okay, the second technique, paradoxical intention, feels even more radical.
It is, and it's incredibly effective for breaking what's called anticipatory anxiety. Think phobias or certain types of social anxiety.
The fear of the fear itself.
That's the loop. So the goal is to break it by intentionally doing what you fear, or even wishing for it to happen.
So if you're terrified of blushing in a meeting?
You intentionally try to blush the deepest, most incredible shade of red you can imagine.
You invite it in. And by
Yeah.
doing that, you take away its power. You're in control again.
Precisely. And that brings us to the real existential core of it all. Attitude modification. This is the deep work.
This one sounds like the hardest by far.
It is, because it's for the things you truly cannot change. A chronic illness, the loss of someone you love, your own mortality.
So what does it do?
It helps a person consciously choose a stance toward that unchangeable thing. An attitude that's aligned with their values, that upholds their dignity and purpose, even with all the pain. It's about choosing life over despair.
Wow. Okay, that is just incredibly powerful. But, our deep dive showed that while logotherapy is so respected, it also faced some really intense criticism.
Oh, yes. And what's fascinating is that the criticism often centered on the implications of the message, especially when you take it outside the context of the camps and into, say, systemic oppression.
Right. So critics started asking, if you put all the emphasis on the individual's attitude,
Does that suggest survival is more about your inner life than about the sheer external brutality of the system you're in?
that's a huge point. If you tell someone stuck in an unjust system that they can always choose their attitude, does that accidentally let the system off the hook.
That was the fear. Critics like Schorsch and Saz argued it could encourage a kind of quietist view, a passivity almost, that favors compromise with oppression rather than fighting it.
Because it's too individualistic.
Exactly. They said it couldn't address systemic problems, social, political, economic, that need systemic solutions. They even worried it was imposing a sort of moral agenda, like there's a right way to suffer.
So the psychological solution might overshadow the political one. Logotherapy gave us this incredible language for values and commitment, but it kind of underplayed the role of social structures.
And that's exactly why modern therapy started moving towards something more structured, more skills-based.
Which brings us to cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT.
That clinical workhorse.
For sure. It's highly structured, it's got a ton of empirical support, and it's all about quick, short-term benefits for specific symptoms.
And its core premise is, well, very straightforward. It basically says that emotional distress, your anxiety, your depression, is maintained by distorted thinking patterns.
Bad thoughts lead to bad feeling.
And bad behaviors. So if the thoughts are the problem, the solution is to identify them, evaluate the evidence for them, and then actively change them.
It's like debugging your own mental code.
Mm-hmm.
You find the cognitive distortion, the catastrophizing, the mind reading, you rewrite the script, and then you test that new script out in the world.
It works wonders for specific, measurable symptoms. It has, unparalleled support for a lot of common issues. But it also has its own critics.
Of course. And what's the main knock on CBT?
That it can sometimes feel, well, a bit too rational. Almost invalidating when you're dealing with really deep emotional pain.
Right. The focus on immediate correction can feel like someone just telling you, hey, stop thinking that way.
Exactly. If you're going through something huge, being handed a worksheet to list your negative automatic thoughts.
And rate them from 1 to 10.
It can feel like it's glossing over the sheer size of the problem. It's an amazing tool for efficiency, but life isn't always about efficiency.
Which is the perfect entry point for ACT acceptance and commitment therapy. It came along as this third wave approach to counter some of that rigidity.
It did. ACT zeroes in on something called experiential avoidance. It sees that for a lot of conditions, PTSD, chronic pain, rumination, the real suffering comes from fighting the thought or the feeling.
Okay, so unlike CBT, the goal isn't to change the thought itself.
No, this is a huge philosophical shift.
So if I have a catastrophic thought, I don't try to argue with it.
You don't have to. In ACT, you learn to relate to your thoughts differently. You create distance from them. You accept them as just mental events. You stop the fight. The goal is what they call psychological flexibility.
I like that term. What does that look like?
It means you accept the uncontrollable things inside you, the pain, the fear, the nagging thoughts, and then you choose actions that are aligned with your deepest values, despite that discomfort.
So your power isn't in controlling your thoughts.
It's in choosing your actions, your commitments.
Okay, let me see if I've got this. The thought is, I'm a failure. I shouldn't even try this. The CBT response might be, okay, where's the evidence you're a failure?
Right, a direct challenge.
But the ACT response is more like, okay, there's that I'm a failure thought again. Thanks, mine. Now I'm going to work on this project anyway because creativity is a core value for me.
That is a perfect summary. It's a gentler, less confrontational way to handle what's going on inside. But as our sources remind us, there are trade-offs with this approach too.
What are the downsides of acceptance?
Well, it can sometimes be slower to bring immediate relief. It's a big mindset shift for people. And critical acceptance can slide into passivity if it's not anchored to that commitment to action.
Acceptance without action is just resignation.
Exactly.
Yep.
You have to have both.
Okay. So we have these three really distinct strategies. Logotherapy says change your attitude, find your meaning. CBT says restructure your thoughts, change your behavior. And ACT says accept your thoughts, live by your values.
And now we can connect all three back to those fundamental problems of being human, what the great therapist Irvin Yalom called the four givens.
Right. Freedom, isolation, meaninglessness, and death.
A lot of our day-to-day anxiety stems from one of those four. We're free, so we're anxious we'll choose wrong. We're alone, so we fear separation. We lack built-in meaning, which can lead to despair.
We're mortal, which leads to terror. That fear of death, William James called it the worm at the core. It drives so much of what we do. How do these three therapies tackle that fear?
They approach it with a kind of clinical bravery, really. Logotherapy, for example, uses the awareness of death, our finitude, as a motivator.
Because our time is limited.
Your engagement with life, your commitment to purpose becomes that much more urgent. Death doesn't erase meaning. For Frankl, it creates it.
Finitude makes purpose mandatory. I like that. What about ACT?
With ACT, death is treated like any other painful internal experience. You accept it, you don't fight it. Those catastrophic thoughts, flashes of your own mortality, you learn to diffuse them.
You see them as just thoughts.
Just mental events, not commands to panic. The goal is to make sure the fear of death doesn't get in the way of valued living.
And CBT? How does its rational framework handle something so primal?
CBT addresses clinical death anxiety with its standard toolkit. It uses structured exposure to death-related thoughts, not avoiding them, but processing them. And it uses cognitive reframing to challenge catastrophic beliefs.
Give me an example of that reframing.
Well, for someone paralyzed by this fear, the work might involve gently probing for, say, underlying religious fears, like a belief in eternal damnation, and then using rational evidence to deframe those ideas.
And it would also look at behaviors.
Oh, yes. It would identify those avoidance behaviors, the compulsive safety checks we do to feel immortal and work to reduce them.
So CBT targets the symptoms, ACT targets our relationship to the fear, and logotherapy uses death to create meaning. This leads to a really profound point from our sources about death happening inside us all the time.
This was one of the most striking facts we found. We aren't static things. We're dynamic processes, constantly dying and renewing.
At a microscopic level.
An unbelievable level.
Yeah.
The research suggests something like 432 billion cells die and are regenerated every single day in the human body.
432 billion, that number is, it's just impossible to grasp.
And if you extrapolate that out over an 80-year lifespan, the cellular turnover means we undergo a whole body replacement roughly 341 times.
So we're not just one static entity fighting off death. We are a constant process of microscopic death and renewal. We basically die and are rebuilt, in a way, almost 4 times a year.
It totally changes the scale of what self-preservation even means. The psychological fight against death is happening at the same time as this constant biological turnover.
So, wrapping this all up, what does this mean for you listening? We've got logotherapy, find meaning, CBT, change your thoughts, ACT, accept your feelings and live your values.
Each one gives you a set of tools for dealing with suffering and the limits of being human.
Right.
And this really points to the ultimate limit of therapy itself. It can clear away neurotic guilt, it can help with despair, but at the end of the day, it brings us face to face with the reality that we are mortal.
And psychology has to deal with that bravely.
It does, without the sweetener, as one source put it, of promised immortality.
Which is the ultimate motivator, really. So we'll leave you with this to think about. Given that staggering biological fact that you undergo a complete cellular renewal almost 4 times a year, how does that change your definition of self-preservation? Is the self something you preserve, or is it something you're continuously, consciously rebuilding? Something to think about long after this deep dive is over.